Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Why MSPs Should Add an Advanced Web Security Service Offering. I'm Sarah Duffy, a Marketing Manager at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's webinar session. Today, I am joined by Mark Valgier, a Solutions Engineer Manager here at Barracuda MSP. During today's webinar, Mark will share how an advanced web security service can prevent cyber attacks that occur through email, web, and network, improve user productivity and bandwidth usage, increase profitability with minimal administrative overhead. Before we get started, I'd like to review some brief housekeeping. During the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to share them using the questions or chat panel to the right of the Zoom webinar screen. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. Please take a moment to tell us what you think so that we can continuously improve the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mark to begin today's presentation. Take it away, Mark.
Great, thanks a lot, Sarah. So I really appreciate everyone joining today. And we really want to focus on malware attacks, and particularly DNS-based attacks. So as you can see here, malware attacks are really starting to inundate us everywhere, and they're continuing to grow. As you see here, 62% of businesses have experienced phishing and social engineering attacks, while 1 in 13 web requests have led to a malware infection or an attack. So really the thing to take away from this is it's just continuing to grow, and we're seeing more and more domains and websites that are hosting these malicious content. So a little more information about DNS-based attacks in 2019. But first, to take a step back, let's understand what DNS, or domain name system, really is and how it functions. So at a high level, DNS is really the internet's phone book. So instead of having to remember an IP address of a specific website, you can go ahead and type the name of that website, and DNS will go ahead and translate that to a lookup of where that website is. So now that we understand that, we can see that it's a very important part of the internet, and it's very key for everything to function on the web. But what we're seeing here is that 80% of the businesses that we surveyed had suffered a DNS attack in the past year. Also, we've noticed over a 50% jump in the amount of cost per attack. So over $1 million right now is the cost of a single DNS attack on average in the United States. We're also seeing that the most targeted sector was finance. Media companies, unfortunately, were hit the hardest by their brand damage because that's a lot of their outward-facing material getting compromised. And then, unfortunately, the government was the worst hit with data theft. And so we're seeing overall, though, that these attacks are really affecting everyone. No one is particularly singled out, but no one's immune from it either. And so we just really need to be conscious that these threats are continuing to grow. Now, if we talk a little bit more about successful cyber attacks overall, we're seeing that the average customer is dealing with about $5 million in total cost associated with an attack. So this includes damages to the reputation, losing customers, the cost to repair and recover their service or their website. All of these things are costing the customer everything over that past attack. And so we also noticed that 22% of these are due to DNS-related attacks. And so we can see even further that on average, 7 attacks are being given to these companies every year. And so that varies all over the scale, some more target-rich, some that are really suffering a lot fewer. But overall, everyone needs to be aware of this because we're seeing this attack level rise year after year. So what does this mean to your customers? Well, unfortunately, DNS is a very friendly protocol and can't really determine if the website is hosting malicious content. It also can't determine if the website itself is malicious. Is it going to be harvesting information that's sensitive? And then finally, DNS is really relied upon by the Internet of Things. So we want to make sure that those devices are also being protected. An attacker could go ahead and try to manipulate DNS so that these smart cams and even smart refrigerators, anything with an IP address, could be given a malicious update or be given command and control to some malicious entity, and now it's no longer functioning as it should. Also, we've seen that internet browsing can be a liability. So 30 to 40% of internet activity is really non-work related. And so as an organization, you could have a liability for user downloading illegal software, maybe going to content that's inappropriate. This is all stuff that businesses need to be aware of too. And again, with the rise of these attacks and the rise of malware being available online, it's again continuously something you need to be more and more aware of and how to protect yourself against it. So today's organizations need a web security solution that provides extensive malware protection and policy enforcement for users' devices, no matter their location. So again, it's really important to be sure that everything you're managing on your environment, and even devices that you're managing that are leaving your environment, are having some kind of protection so they're not able to be compromised by these malicious DNS-based attacks and malware. So MSPs can now help you deliver this service. And when I say that, I mean that Barracuda Content Shield is a cloud-based provisioned web security solution, really full of content filtering options, powered by our extensive real-time threat intelligence. We're able to protect users on-site and remote from malicious sites, inappropriate content, as well as file-based threats. So how does Content Shield work? Well, fundamentally, when a user is going to make a request out to visit a website, standard DNS is going to go ahead and take that lookup and redirect them to that website, regardless of what it is. By implementing Content Shield, we're actually able to take a look at your content policy, employ filtering technology to make sure that you're not getting to malicious sites, and fundamentally determine if we're going to allow that connection to be made. So if it's going to something that's malicious or against your policy, we're able to prevent that connection from happening, thereby protecting your environment. So now let's talk about some of the features of Barracuda Content Shield itself. First, advanced DNS and URL filtering. Again, we have 96 different policies that allow you to configure specifically what content you want users to get to, making sure that anything that is against your policy is not going to allow you to be connected to. We're also making these decisions about what's malicious from information we get from multiple threat vectors. So when I say this, this is not just information from firewalls or information from email security. This is information from all of Barracuda's security devices, all put together in this comprehensive database worldwide. So we're understanding where these zero-day threats are coming from, and we're understanding a brand new domain that's now hosting malicious content. And so because of this, we're able to very, very quickly go ahead and prevent these attacks from happening. Remote user protection is also key. Like I mentioned before, being able to protect a device that's off of the network, but still under your management is very, very important. So we actually have the technology option to allow agents to protect that device regardless of where that person is connecting from. Maybe a coffee shop, maybe a hotel, but we're still providing that protection wherever they might be. We have 96 predefined category filters, making it very, very easy for you to develop a policy that's going to prevent those threats or that inappropriate content from getting through. You're also not going to have to worry about keeping up with what's the new website that's hosting this content, as we're constantly using our URL filtering information to keep those updated, so you don't have to worry about a new website that comes through. If you want a specific category blocked, it's going to go ahead and already be blocked for you. We now have the capability as well to do granular per user policy control. So this allows you to set up situations where maybe some executives need access to a much larger group of websites than maybe someone who's an administrative assistant. You can have separate policy for separate users or groups. Also, customizing reporting is available. So you're able to create reports about users or threats or different websites that are visited, deliver those to your customer, and then they're going to be able to see what you've protected them against and why it's important to have this service enabled. So really demonstrating your value to your customers. We also offer per user licensing. This is really important because there are solutions out there that are going to try to bill you by number of connections out to the DNS service. In theory, it sounds like that would be fine, but oftentimes there are devices on networks that can be very, very chatty. And so you may run into that threshold very, very quickly when in fact it was simply a very chatty device on the network making the same query over and over. With the per user licensing, we understand that users may have multiple different devices, but it's going to keep that cost continuous, and you're not going to have to worry about any overages. It's also very simple to set up and manage. You're essentially routing your outbound internet traffic to the Barracuda service, setting up your policy for categories and protection, and then it's pretty much good to go from there. Proxy-free architecture for low latency. This goes along with that remote device protection capability. Instead of that remote user having to throttle all of its traffic back to the headquarters site, now to the internet, extra hops, bandwidth hog, all these bad things that are associated with a pattern like that. That agent is actually protecting the device on box, and so it's able to go out to the internet without having to proxy anywhere. Again, providing that protection still that is in your company's policy. And then finally, it's really easy to manage. There is a nice web user interface. You can log on, adjust your policies, make any changes without having to deploy any hardware anywhere. We also have it integrated with our managed workplace, RMM. So now you have some additional controls and flexibility with the BCS integration there. So overall, the goal here is to create a service offering for your customers that allows them to remain secure, but it's easier for you to deploy and you can remain profitable with this, and then really show your customers the value of this security service that you're providing them, giving them reports, showing them what you've protected them from. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Sarah.